Verse 17. This is the type of man that Solomon is going to speak about, is the very type of men I just described in myself and in the drunkard in California. So in verse 17. He that passeth by and meddleth with strife, belonging not to him, is like one that taketh a dog by the ears. Don't you love the imagery in that one? How many of you got dogs? I got dogs. Okay. If you do, you ever been around? If you ever been around dogs, messed with dogs before, you look what he said. He that passeth by and meddleth with strife, belonging not to him, is like one that taketh a dog by the ears. So I want to just make an observation here about a contentious spirit, because it's obvious that if you're passing by and you see discord, or you see contention, or you see an argument or a quarrel or some kind of disagreement going on between two parties, and you insert yourself into that, there's something going on in your spirit. Now, like if you see two people that are getting after it, and you may know them or you may not know them, but you see them and they're at it, and you insert yourself, not in a sense to try to bring peace to the situation, but you insert yourself in a manner that you become part of the argument, there's something going on in your spirit there. You're looking for a fight. Is that right? And there are people like that are looking for a fight. They insert themselves into someone else's argument. Here's a theological way of saying that. They stick their nose in other people's business. Some of y'all get that later. That wasn't really a theological way of saying it. They're sticking their nose in other people's business. And they see this argument, this discord going on, and so they insert themselves in the midst of it, and they become one of the aggressors as well. And so Solomon said, someone like that is like someone who grabs a dog by its ears. Now, let me make this observation, because whenever we talk about dogs today, we think about little Fifi, little pet that we've tamed, and it's like part of the family. In these days, in ancient days, dogs were not domesticated. You know that, right? Dogs were not considered to be domesticated pets. They ran wild, and oftentimes ran in packs. And the way that they survived was basically by going through the trash cans and the garbage dumps of villages or various cities. And so, when you see dog here, don't think about your little pet at home that licks you in the face and likes you. Think about a mean, nasty junkyard dog. Okay, something that's aggressive, that is violent, that is defensive and even protective. And Solomon said, if you are prone to stick your nose in other people's business, then that's just like grabbing a dog by its ears. Now, if you've ever felt threatened by a dog and felt like that dog was about to bite you, you either want to do two things. You either want to run for your life and get away, or you want to grab it by the scruff of its neck. You don't want to grab it by its ears, because you're not going to have a lot of control with that dog by its ears. It's going to get away from you, and most likely you're going to get bit. So what Solomon is saying here is, if you have this contentious spirit and you feel the need to insert yourself in the midst of somebody else's discord and somebody else's argument, basically what Solomon is saying is, if you're meddling with strife, you're going to create trouble for yourself. You're going to create trouble for yourself. Let's look at this in Exodus chapter 2. We see this pictured, if you would. Go ahead and flip over to Exodus. You can hold your place there in Proverbs. And look in Exodus chapter 2 at the story of Moses. Exodus chapter 2. This is after Moses had been born, of course, and raised for a few years with his mom and dad, and then sent to Pharaoh's house, then to be raised by Pharaoh's daughter. So in chapter 11, this is a time in Moses' life where really he's known privilege in Egypt. He's lived in the house of Pharaoh, and now he's going to make a choice. Look in verse 11. And it came to pass in those days, when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren, and looked on their burdens, And he spied an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew, one of his brothers, or one of his brethren. So he saw a Hebrew. He is a Hebrew. Even though he's living in the king of Egypt's house, he is a Jew. And the Jews were the slaves to the Egyptians. And he steps out and he sees this Egyptian smiting a Hebrew. And he looked this way and that way. Okay, now, he's not crossing the street, right? Are you tracking with me? He's not. Okay, he's looking to see if anybody else is looking. You know, like you do whenever you're about to do something you're not supposed to do? I know, y'all never do that. But he's looking to see if there's anybody watching so that he can do something that he knows he's really not supposed to do, but he's about to do it anyways. He just wants to make sure he's not going to get caught doing it. So he looked this way and that way, and when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. He killed him and buried him in the sand. And then notice this. And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strove together. You understand that word strove would be a form of the word strife that we're looking at. Y'all see that, right? So there's 2 Hebrews and they're striving together. They're arguing, they're bickering, they're quarreling. And he said to him that did the wrong, wherefore smitest thou thy fellow? And he just jumps right in the middle of their business and begins to rebuke the one that was wrong. And he said, who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me as thou killest the Egyptian? Moses feared and said, surely this thing is known. Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses, but Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian. And he sat down by a well. So watch here. Let me remind you what we're looking at here. We're looking at a scenario that Solomon says, if you insert yourself in somebody else's argument and strife, you're creating trouble for yourself. If you're going to move, you have this spirit within you that feels like this is my place to step in and take care of this, then ultimately what you're going to do is you're going to create strife for yourself. You're going to create problems for yourself. And you see that exactly here in Moses' life. He sees a Hebrew being smitten by an Egyptian, and he didn't take care of it in a right way, but rather took matters into his own hands. And I want you to think for just a moment. Let's just kind of put ourselves in the story. Let's say, for example, that we are in, we're in a foreign country, like, Texas. We're in Texas, and we understand and know that in Texas, people cheer for Texas. Okay? And so we see another OU fan, they've got their OU shirt on, right? And so we immediately feel some kind of camaraderie here, but wait, we're in Texas. Right? So we see our OU buddy and we look at him and see him from a distance in his OU shirt or his OU hat, and then these Texas dudes grab him and begin to put the whoop dog on him. And they just beat the daylights out of him. And inside of us, there's this enrage, this sense of, that's one of my buds. That's one of my guys. And you're messing with him. And really a sense of anger and pride begins to swell up that doesn't care anything about justice. It then begins to turn to, hey, this is Texas and Oklahoma, right? Kind of think of it that way. I know that's kind of a very silly way to think of it, but this is kind of what's happening to Moses. He's in Egypt, and he sees one of his own being smitten by an Egyptian. And rather than looking for justice, he takes matters into his own hands, and out of a sense of anger, he takes action. And then the next day, sees 2 of his own brethren, and he inserts himself in the midst of that. And in the midst of that, basically, he discovers that someone knows what he did. They know that he murdered someone, and now he understands and knows that because he is a Hebrew, even though he's living in the house of Pharaoh, he's murdered an Egyptian, Pharaoh's going to be out for him, and so he's forced to leave everything that he's known. Come on. Trouble came to his life because he inserted himself in somebody else's business. Not in a right way, but in a wrong way. He did what Solomon said to do, or Solomon was describing in Proverbs 26. But I want to back up just a minute if I can. Can we go a little deeper than this? Can we? Are y'all okay? Why exactly did Moses do that? Like why did he insert himself in that situation? Now, if we're going to go across the room, I'll probably get pat answers like this. Well, because he's angry, because he's proud, right? Because the Bible says that only by pride cometh what? Contention. So we understand that pride and anger is part of it. But wait a minute, why is he angry? What's feeding this pride inside of him? And that's kind of where I want to go tonight. Why did Moses insert himself into these matters? And I can't say this dogmatically, but I think you'll find this not just in Moses' life, but I'm pretty sure now I know we'll see this in the spirit of someone who is contentious. And it would seem that there was a little bit of a contentious spirit in Moses. He's feeling some aggression. He's feeling some angst in his soul. He's looking for a way to act out or work out some of the frustration that's in his heart. But what's really going on? What's the heart of the matter? And I would submit to you, if you were to look at the scenario of what took place and consider it in Moses' life and certainly in the lives of others that do this, one of the reasons why someone has a contentious spirit and seeks to insert themselves into the affairs of others, ultimately, when you break it down, there is an inward longing for some kind of love or acceptance from others. So I'm going to insert myself in this. I'm going to flex my muscles, and whenever everything's said and done, somebody's going to love me. I'm going to be the superhero, right? I'm going to be the Batman. I'm going to be the Superman's going to step into this, and I'm going to flex my muscle in the midst of this. And when I get done, somebody's going to love me more. They're going to accept me more. And so while we say pride and anger, I get that. But really below even the pride and anger is this inward longing and this inward desire for the love and acceptance of others. And it's worked out in a contentious spirit. There are those, and I think Moses was one of them. This isn't poking him in the eye because I see myself in this. And you probably see yourself in this as well. There are those of us in this room that if we were to really stop and by God's help do some introspection, we would find deep in our soul this need to have people need us. Are you watching? This need to have people need us. Like I need somebody I need to feel needed. There's some kind of satisfaction and gratification that comes from feeling needed. And so that then begins to work out itself in many different ways. And one of them is ultimately leads to a contentious spirit that begins to work itself into matters that it doesn't belong in, simply for the sake of, I want somebody to love me, I want somebody to accept me, I want somebody to need me. So I'm going to do this. So that's one scenario. Then go back to Proverbs. Contentious spirit is one that meddles with strife. Somebody who meddles with strife. Somebody who inserts themselves in discord. Then look in verse 21. Actually, let's read verse 20 and 21. But the point's going to come out of verse 21. He says in verse 20, where no wood is, there the fire goeth out. So where there is no talebearer, okay, that's not a person with a tail. That's tale. We're going to get to this in just a minute. Where there is no talebearer, the strife ceaseth. As coals are to burning coals and wood to fire, so is a contentious man to kindle strife. So he notes in verse 17 that this individual, this person that is given to strife, meddles in the strife of others. In this instance, he speaks of a contentious man as being one who kindles strife. Who kindles strife. So what does that mean to kindle strife? Well, by definition, it means to provoke or to excite to action. It's kind of like, and we're familiar with this if you've ever built a fire before, you get kindling to build that fire, get that fire going. But then, if the fire begins to die down, you put some more wood on that fire, or whatever source you're burning, put some more of that on there to build that fire up and cause it to light up even more. Are you following me? That's the idea of kindling a fire. And this person here that he's talking about that's contentious, it doesn't kindle a fire per se, but kindles strife. He adds fuel, if you would, to discord or to an argument that's taking place. The tongue, James says, the tongue is usually the instrument that's used to kindle strife. That's why I read verse 20. Where no wood is, there the fire goeth out. So where there is no talebearer, the strife ceaseth. That means this: if there is a talebearer, and a talebearer is someone who is a backbiter or someone who's speaking evil about another outside of the presence of that person. Okay, so that's what a talebearer is. And usually whenever there's strife that's being stirred up, it's usually somehow being done with the tongue, like talking. And James says that the tongue is like a fire. It's an unruly evil. No man can tame it. And emphasize that, no man can tame it. And we understand and know how much strife that can be stirred up simply by somebody talking. I mean, that's where arguments really heat up at, isn't it? Is whenever we start speaking. Even amongst our friends. Even amongst our families. Even amongst our spouses. You want to see an argument heat up? Just let your tongue run wild. And some of us think that we have this gift, like sarcasm is a gift. That's just the way I am. I speak my mind. That's not a gift. Well, I'm just very good at sarcasm. That's really not a gift. Well, this is just naturally for me to dominate people with my speech. That's not a gift. In fact, that's very dangerous, because what that can do is that can take something that's really small and make it really big really quick. Like a forest fire in the living room, or a forest fire in the church house, or a forest fire in the classroom, or a forest fire in the office. You can just take something that's small, and because you said that one thing, that one comment, sarcasm or rudeness. I'm just being honest. Whoa. What's the spirit of you being honest? You can set the whole place on fire. And you can burn people to the ground. Let's look at Acts chapter 6 at this. Acts chapter 6. Here's an example of this in Acts chapter 6. If you're familiar with the New Testament, you're familiar with this man named Stephen. And we'll mention Stephen Sunday morning. I'm looking forward to Sunday morning. We're going to talk about the gospel and how God calls people to himself through the preaching of the gospel. But Stephen is one of those gospel preachers. And in Acts chapter 6, we read about his preaching and how men responded to him preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so in verse 8, this is just the account we'll read. And Stephen, full of faith and power, did great wonders and miracles among the people. Then there arose, now we've got to emphasize that. He's full of faith and power. He did great wonders and miracles among the people. Then there arose certain of the synagogue, that's the Jewish synagogue, which is called the synagogue of the Libertines and Cyrenians and Alexandrians, and of them of Cilicia and of Asia. What were they doing with Stephen? Somebody help me there. Disputing. Sounds like an argument. Sounds like a fight. Not necessarily with fists, but a fight with words. They were disputing with Stephen. And they were not able to resist the wisdom and the spirit by which he spake. Okay, so check this out. They're arguing with Stephen. Not only are they arguing with Stephen, they're losing. They lost the battle. You ever been in an argument before and you've lost it and you know you've lost it, but you just keep talking anyways? That's what these dudes have done. They can't. There's nothing they can do to resist the wisdom and the spirit of Stephen, because it's the wisdom and the spirit of God, by the way. The wisdom and the spirit of truth. And so even though they're trying, they're not getting anywhere, and they know they're not getting anywhere. And so here's where you see the contentious spirit in them begin to burn. Because now that they've lost the argument, they've lost their credibility. There's a crowd that's gathered that's watching this. So now they're embarrassed. Guess what happens? And Verse 11, then they suborned men, which said, we have heard him speak blasphemous words against Moses and against God. And they stirred up the people. That idea of stirring up is that idea of kindling. They stirred up the people and the elders, the religious leaders of the Jews. This isn't talking about elders of a church. This is talking about Jewish elders that existed in the synagogues. And they stirred up the people and the elders and the scribes and came upon him, came upon Stephen and caught him and brought him to the council and set up false witnesses. That's liars. In other words, they began to plot and they began to hire people to say things about Stephen or to say that Stephen said things he never said because they want to make him look guilty in front of the council. Why do they want to make him look guilty in front of the council? Because they're angry. Why are they angry? Because they're contentious. Why are they contentious? We're going to come to that. Hold on. So they set up false witnesses which said, this man ceaseth not to speak blasphemous words against this holy place and the law. And we have heard him say about this Jesus of Nazareth, we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth shall destroy this place and shall change the customs which Moses delivered us. And all that sat in the council, looking steadfastly on him, saw his face as it had been the face of an angel. Now, I don't know exactly what that means. The angel's a messenger, so don't get this idea that his face is all glowing white. And I don't know what that looked like, but his face is as the face of an angel, meaning that he just presented a message. And so they're listening to all these things being said about him that are not true. And the reason why these things are being said about him, now watch this, is because there are some contentious men who went and stirred up the people. They stirred up the scribes. They stirred up the elders. They stirred up folks there in that particular community so that they could basically silence him. Why were these men seeking to do this? Why were they... I mean, he's just preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. What are they so uptight about? Well, again, we could give some pat answers like, well, they were angry, they were proud. But can I go just a little bit deeper than that? To something that I think we all deal with even still today. This is definitely something that you can see amongst race. This is something that you saw break loose in Baltimore this week. This is something you saw break loose in Ferguson. Maybe something that broke loose in your life at some point in time. What's really going on in their heart that makes them so irritated by this? And I would submit to you that if you were to look at this particular scenario, what was going on with these Jewish leaders, these Jewish leaders had a perception about their culture, about their people. And it was that their culture and that their people were superior to others. You tracking with me? Like, we're Jews, we're God's people, got the law, so we're superior to the other cultures and the other races. And in the midst of that, they're devout men, and so these men are in the midst of this superior culture. They are elevated even amongst the people in that culture. And so even within the culture, they see themselves as keepers of the law, as obedient to the law of God. And so inside their hearts, they've elevated themselves, if you would, and maybe exalted themselves and relied heavily on an image of themselves that's being portrayed amongst the people. So amongst the people, they're being portrayed moral, and they're being portrayed as decent law keepers. So they're being honored amongst the people, and they've developed this image in front of the people that feeds within them this longing and this desire for an identity that is honored and glorified. Does that make sense? They're seeking status. They're status seekers. And then when Stephen comes and begins to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ, he begins to mess with the foundation of their status. Because you pull the law out from underneath them, and you've pulled their identity out from underneath them. You pull the law of Moses out from underneath there. That's what they're hinging their identity on and their status on amongst the people. We are good law keepers And if you pull that out from underneath them, they don't know who they are. And it just upsets their world. And so as a result of that, they act out in contention. And what the problem is here in both of these instances, okay, in someone who's meddling with strife and someone who's kindling strife. Can I just go ahead and clarify something? We would look at that and say, well, that's a sin problem. And yes, that's partially true. But ultimately, can I say it this way? It's a gospel problem. Let that sink in for just a minute. It's a gospel problem. And here's why I say it's a gospel problem. Because in Jesus Christ, God has dealt with sin. So any problem we have in this life, even though it may pertain to sin, really is a problem that we have with the gospel. It's a gospel issue. And so here's why I would say that. Tim Keller made this statement about someone who is seeking their self-image and made this observation about people without the gospel. I'll just read this quote to you. I thought it was well said. He says this: without the gospel, your self-image is based upon living up to some standards, whether yours or someone's imposed upon you. If you live up to those standards, you will be confident but not humble. That was this case here. You live up to those standards, you're confident but not humble. And if you don't live up to them, you will be humble but not confident. You beat yourself up all the time. That's a gospel problem. And this contentious person kindles strife between others, or even kindles strife with others in order to feel better about themselves. They're really trying to feed their ego. They're really trying to preserve their identity and find their identity in the power to control or the power to manipulate others or the power to dominate others. And if they can't manipulate or if they can't dominate other people, then ultimately they feel inferior. And so therefore that's where the contention lies. And so I would submit to you that both of these scenarios are gospel problems. People who are seeking the love and the attention of others. Come on, we all want to be loved, don't we? Let's be honest. We all want to be loved. Yes, we do. We all want to be loved. We're all pursuing love. We all seek to be loved. We want to be accepted. We do want to be accepted. And so we seek to be accepted. We all desire some kind of identity. And all of us in this room have some kind of self-image of ourselves. That if we were honest, we have this identity of ourselves, this picture of ourselves that we want to be, and then we try to measure up to that picture. Like, I got in my mind what I want to be, and so I'm going to try to live up to that. If I live up to that, well, then I'm going to be satisfied. The gospel shatters all of that. And here is the solution to those problems. Here's where peace comes. Can I just say it this way? Peace is not something that you and I attain on our own. Like if you got a problem with the contentious spirit, like if you're argumentative and you're combative, that's not something you can fix on your own. Like I'm going to try harder. I'm going to bless God. I'm going to be a peacemaker. I'm going to make myself a peacemaker. So I'm going to go read 500 books on peace, and I'm going to go out and be peace. Peace is a fruit of the Spirit. That means this, and I don't know if we get this or not. Peace is something that the Spirit of God produces in us. Like that's the end result is peace. The process to get there. There's a process in getting to the fruit. Like we don't just immediately grow peace like in one day. Like bam, there's the peace. Peace is something that's grown in. It's just like you plant an apple tree. There's going to have the roots are going to be fed, and there's going to be a process where that thing's going to grow, and leaves are going to come. And pretty soon, if those roots are healthy and that tree is vibrant, it's going to produce fruit. Now, we're not dangling apples off of ourselves, but there is fruit in our lives that is the result of the Spirit of God nurturing and cultivating and bringing life in our soul that was once dead, but by Him has been made alive. And as a result, after a period of time, as our understanding of the gospel, and as our understanding of who Jesus Christ is, as we are brought into that understanding by the Spirit of God, one of the end results of that understanding is going to be peace. Peace with God leads to peace with others. In fact, I would submit to you that if a person is contentious, ultimately, it's one of two things. It's because there's not been peace with God established through Jesus Christ, or we're not walking and living in the peace that's been established through Jesus Christ. Like, you can be saved, know the Lord, and still be a jerk. Or jerkette. What's a jerkette? Well, that'd be the female side of a jerk, okay? Now, you can be saved and still be argumentative. I know y'all look around like, who's he talking to? If you can be a child of God and still be combative, be one that's, fussy. So what is the root? What's the problem with all? Like, what's going on in that? If there's not peace in the heart, there's not going to be peace in your life. So all these things are symptoms, but we sometimes never get down to the root of the problem. And the root of the problem always has to do with the gospel of Jesus Christ and the Spirit of God and our understanding of the gospel. So that get this. A contentious spirit is transformed and changed whenever the Spirit of God brings that heart into an understanding of this. That Jesus Christ, watch this, Jesus Christ, His life and death and burial and resurrection and His imputed righteousness upon you and I has caused us to be loved and accepted completely by God. So if I'm loved and accepted completely by God, I don't have need, listen, I don't have need to be loved and accepted by others. I can rest in that love that God has for me, so I don't have to try to force myself into situations and flex my muscle and show off and impress other people so that they'll like me. That need goes away whenever you rest in and you just settle down into the fact that in Jesus Christ you are completely loved and completely accepted of God. That's a huge understanding. You get to that point, and I'm telling you, friend, it's going to release you from a lot of things in your life that create nothing but strife and contention and unrest in your soul. In Jesus Christ, you are loved, not because you're super awesome, because you're not. You're in Jesus Christ, you are loved and accepted because He is loved and accepted of the Father. Because He is righteous, you are righteous. This is a big deal. If this isn't a big deal to you, friend, and I feel for you because the Spirit of God needs to work in your heart to bring you to the realization of who you are in Jesus Christ or who He wants to make you to be in Jesus Christ. So you no longer have to insert yourselves in other people's business, fight and duke it out, because your heart's at peace with God. In Jesus Christ, as the Spirit brings us to understand this, we no longer need to feel good about ourselves because we're dead to sin. We're made alive unto God through Jesus Christ. Our life is lost in Jesus Christ and becomes all in all. So look, I don't need to protect my image in front of other people because my identity is not in me, it's in Him. I don't have to be a bully. I don't have to intimidate. I don't have to get the upper hand. I don't have to always outdo you. Are you tracking with me? I don't have to do that because my identity is not in me anymore. It used to be, but it's not in me no more. It's in Him. So, who's going to outdo Him? I mean, who's going to actually rise above Him? When we rest in that, friend, then it takes care of this pitiful, fleshly need to feel like we got to compete with other people. My soul, what peace. I don't have to keep striving against you. Because I'm at peace with the Lord. Through the Lord. Those things can be in place, but yet not understand that. And that's where the Spirit of God works in our understanding and bringing those truths to light in our heart and life. And when we walk in those truths, the end result is going to be the fruit of peace. And only when a heart is made to understand the gospel of Jesus Christ will the fruit of peace appear. You can't make it. It's the Spirit of God, by grace, working in us an understanding of who Jesus is. And the more we see Jesus, the more we understand who He is and who we are in Him, the more fruit will result in our life. So this matter of a contentious spirit, overcoming a contentious spirit that we read about in Proverbs, the way that you overcome it is by the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's by the Spirit of God at work in us. Once that is at play, once we are released from this competitive, I've got to impress you, or this I've got to go in and win the battle for other people so that they need me. Once that is gone, we are freed up to love people unconditionally. No strings attached. Not needing something from you, not wanting something from you. We're freed up to love them with the love of God. Thankful for the gospel, aren't you? And it's rich. Sure is. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for the truths of the gospel. And I pray that you would give understanding tonight into hearts that are maybe still struggling, searching for peace. Maybe there's those that find themselves like this one that Solomon described, constantly stirring up strife, argumentative. Maybe there's one tonight, maybe all of us tonight, really, for that matter, can see ourselves as being one that finds some kind of longing in our flesh to be needed by others. Find our identity in being better than others. Lord, would you deliver us from that? Holy Spirit, would you give us understanding of Jesus Christ and who we are, and free us up to love people, to be at peace with one another, be at peace with others. Lord, I pray that by your grace you'd work these truths into our hearts and lives. For your glory, I pray. Amen.